I'm Patty Paul. Today I am especially pleased to have my guest Steve Parrish make a return visit to my show. Steve, among many wonderful things that he does, is a most experienced channel, and Steve is going to be channeling the unconditionally loving, unseen friend known as Elanor. Steve, welcome to my show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And it's so great to have you back. I know that Elanor is going to have a lot of important things to say about some of the subjects, and so I'm going to invite you to begin your channeling process. As you're doing that, the credits will roll, and when the credits have finished, if Elanor isn't quite back with us, we'll wait patiently. I see that Elanor is almost with us.
All right, indeed. Well, greetings.
Welcome to the show. It's wonderful to have you back. And as you are aware, we have some very important issues as far as importance to the human race.
Yes.
To have you give your insights and wisdom on. This particular show, I'd like you to focus on an event that is inevitable for every human being, and yet we have so much fear about it, so much misunderstanding. I'm talking, of course, about death.
Yes.
So I open that topic to you, Elanor. The formal title of this show is Death and Beyond, so that gives you kind of an open-ended expression.
All right. Well, before everybody jumps for the remote to change the channel, before everybody jumps up and goes running out to the kitchen, just sure they have to have potato chips right at this moment. Let us say that we very much are pleased to have the opportunity to discuss death in this way and in this format, and we frequently do talk about death because it's such a vitally important part of living. And yet, in your world, in your culture in particular, there is tremendous fear, tremendous denial. People don't want to deal with it. Essentially, they push it away. And that's understandable in many ways. Death, when you experience it at that personal level, often brings up a series of emotions, a series of issues, not the least of which is a sense of bereavement, a sense of grieving, a sense of loss. And these are emotions that people generally don't like feeling in that sense, and therefore they have a tendency to shy away. There's also the quality of the unknown that comes with death, and hopefully we can shed a little light on that today. But we would suggest that the primary thing that people need to think about when thinking of death, if you can let yourself for the moment set aside the immediacy of death, the fear of it, the scariness of it, the pain and the loss, to think of it more as an idea just for a while, for these 30 minutes or so. That life is a process. It is a flow, a continuum. Death is a part of the process called life. You cannot have one without the other. Life is a coin with two sides. The living, what you experience in your daily world, interacting in the physical plane. And quote-unquote the other side, dying. Which so many of you think or fear is the end in that sense. That you haven't let yourself expand your consciousness to go ahead and have experience of death now, before you enter that, what you often think of as a void, though we'll tell you this, it's certainly not a void. There's lots out there. One of the reasons it's important to let yourself think about death, to let yourself face death, to let yourself examine your raw materials, your beliefs and your attitudes, your thoughts, your feelings, your choices, your decisions around death, is because death is a choice, and it is always a choice. Now, It is not always a conscious choice. So we're not saying that if someone you knew went out and was in a car accident or had some terrible thing happen to them, that morning they got up and said, well, you know, today's a good day to die, I think I'm going to go do that. That's not what we're talking about. How you make choices is what we're talking about. Part of the process of living, part of why you come to this physical arena at all, is to learn about making choices and all the different levels and layers and dimensions that are involved in making choices. And we put out the ideas to so many that you do create your own reality 100% start to finish, literally from before you are born through the birth process, choosing your parents, choosing your family, setting up certain plans, if you will, certain goals, certain schemes maybe you'd call them, putting them into place, living your life, and coming to, ultimately, the point where you stop living the physical version of this particular lifetime. It doesn't mean you stop being. It doesn't mean you stop growing. It's one of the most wondrous changes and transitional periods there is. And yet in your world, and again especially in the American culture, there is such fear, such denial. Again, one of those places where chauvinism has definitely played a big part. You are told, you are taught, you are shown on a regular basis. The people around you, your significant parental figures, whether they're bloodline parents or just an adult figure that has impact on you, constantly telling you that death is wrong, that it's weak, that it's a failure. If they tell you even that much at any conscious level, whether they say it in words, they live it, they put it out, death is always talked about in hushed tones. Even from when you're a child, if they'll tell you at all in that sense, if they'll share it with you, that somebody important has moved on, somebody important has made a grand and wondrous transition, and yet in your world, oh no, oh, we all wear black. And we talk quietly. And we're very careful of certain people's feelings, mostly our own, because we're afraid that they're going to be activated, we're afraid they're going to get tweaked. We'll say again, death is a choice. It's not a conscious choice. Frequently. The good news here is it can become a conscious choice. Those of you who work on your spirituality, those of you who are involved in what's often referred to as map making in that sense, whatever form it takes, one of the reasons you come to life at all is in order to learn about your multidimensionality, about your connection with life, if you will, beyond the physical plane. Death is the transition point. It's a doorway, if you will. You come in through the doorway called birth, you go through your life, you learn all kinds of stuff, you go out through the doorway called death. It is a circle, it is a cycle, there is a beginning and an end within the framework of your physical world. But outside of physicality, there isn't a beginning and an end the way you think of it, the way you experience it here. As you learn, as you grow, as you reach, as you stretch, as you learn how to meditate, as you learn how to contact your higher self, as you practice stretching beyond what you call the physical, you are laying the groundwork for allowing death to be a more conscious choice. Now often in your world, death comes out of a series of choices, if you will. Frequently less than conscious. You have a subconscious. You have an unconscious. You have what we would call a superconscious, which would be the realm of your soul and your spirit and your higher self, just for want of a word to attach there in that sense. And all of those pieces of you, all of those parts of you, participate in making a choice about when and how you're going to make the transition out of this planet. Now, when you deny that, when you won't look at it, when you push it away, when you only will wear black and only will talk in hushed tones, how likely are you to bring the light of consciousness to this particular issue? And the answer is not very. And for many people, they don't want to, they're afraid to. It's just, how can I know? And we'd suggest you can. You can literally have conscious experience, both of transiting the physical plane, even though you're still in it, through, in that sense, meditation. That's really what you do when you meditate. When you count yourself down, you are slipping your consciousness out of the limitations of the package that you call the physical world. Now, chauvinism will say, oh, you're just making it up, it's just your imagination, and it's nothing. And we'd suggest, again, that's such a lie. This is a place of tremendous power. And the chauvinistic part of you, the chauvinistic part of your world, will tell you, stay away from power. Power is not safe. It's one of the main reasons that so many people are so afraid of death. That they will not go with it. They will not go near it. They will not, even if they go through the experience of a funeral or the grief of a passing of a person that they know. They won't allow their consciousness to go deeper into the stuff, if you will, of death. The energy, the flavor of death. Because it's death. There should be big organs playing in the background, yes. Scary stuff. Ghosts, goblins, evil, cemeteries, dark. Every association that you have. Tainted, coloured, black, scary, stay away, don't do it. And on a minimal level you understand, yeah, we know everybody's going to. Except that, as you say, everybody's going to, so many of you don't get it. You don't bring it home. Everybody includes me. And rather than let it be a random act in that sense, or telling yourself that it is, we suggest you want to go into it. You want to explore it. You want to understand what it's made of in that sense, particularly at the level of making a choice, because you do have the ability, you as a species, are reaching a point in your evolutionary process where you can have those experiences. You can bring that choice much more to consciousness. If death is not a choice, life is not going to be a choice. Your willingness to really participate fully and completely and 100% in the juice of your life is going to be diminished if you deny that there is death and there's juice there too. To work with it, many people need to look at their beliefs around death, to be more conscious of telling yourself, what do I honestly feel? How close have I actually let myself come? How willing am I to walk up and stand and face death, which in fact is one of the faces of my soul? To push past the fear, to push past what you've been told, to let yourself, as an individual, take journeys. And they're wonderful, fantastic journeys. Many of you are aware of the idea of past lives. One of the ways of dealing with death is to go on a journey of past life. It helps expand your consciousness. It helps expand your view in that sense. It helps take the pressure off, if you will. See, if you really just, this life is it. This is all you get. There's just this one.
That's what scares a lot of people, especially if they're not fully living in their current life. Somewhere they're thinking, is this all there is? And no wonder they're afraid of death.
Indeed, particularly if they think there's nothing beyond
yes.
that in that sense. And we will say, you don't have to believe us, but we will say there are many lifetimes. You experience many, many lifetimes. And you, as a conscious individual, can go and explore other lifetimes. But you're not going to be likely to let yourself do that, or even if you go through the motions, you're not going to let yourself feel the realness of it. If you're afraid of the idea of crossing the barrier of the physical in that sense. And we know many people would like us to talk about what does heaven look like. Well, heaven looks like whatever you want it to look like. Because in the same way that you create your reality, that you create your life, you create your experience of death. In that sense, when most people die, they experience what they think heaven is going to look like, whatever that may be for any individual. Now that's the first step, if you will. You step through the door, and for many people will say there's a level of consciousness where they experience walking in relatively beautiful nature settings in that sense, and they're greeted by people who love them. Understand, that's really not what death is. That's just what you set up to be met. It's much like when you transit through the door of birth. There are people waiting there to love you. And it puts a pattern, if you will, into your consciousness. And that's part of why, when people experience death in that sense, leaving the physical, their first experience after leaving the physical is being greeted by people who love them. And we know that you've heard of, there's been lots of stuff written on the idea of people who had near-death experiences. And there's a commonality, the frequency of seeing a sense of a tunnel of light, and they enter the light and they're greeted by people who love them. Again, we'd suggest that comes out of an image in your subconscious and your unconscious. That's planted there, that's imprinted, partially through the process called birth and partially through the process called death, that you have experienced again and again and again. And that's why
that makes sense.
It's hooked in there in that sense. People's fear. First of death, and then backing up a bit in time, their fear of growing old separates them. It tends to put a wall, it puts a barrier between you and allowing yourself to have that experience of walking into what's beyond the physical, which is all that death is. It is a doorway. You could call it a new beginning. We do call it a new beginning, a transition. But if you won't ever let yourself walk up and peek through the door in that sense, you're liable to keep all that very heavy, weighty stuff that comes with death. Now, we are not diminishing in any way that the experience of having somebody else die does cause pain. There is grief, there is separation. What we would suggest is it doesn't have to be so painful. It doesn't have to be so intense if you will let yourself. Work on expanding your belief system in that sense to understand life and death are two sides of the same coin. Therefore, just because somebody has walked out of the physical and I'm still in it, it doesn't mean that I can't reach through and still communicate with them. That they are literally more available from that particular perspective of the non-physical. There is more of you that is non-physical than there is that is physical. Only your perception changes. Your awareness changes. This stuff is illusory. What's on the other side of death is far more real than anything that's here. Now we understand that's hard to grasp. That's a big pill to swallow. Because you are physical. You feel it. You touch it. It's solid. Rocks are hard and water's wet. And that's where spirituality comes in. Spirituality, by definition, your personal relationship with whatever is beyond the physical. Part of why people feel such a longing to pursue spirituality, even when they don't understand what it is or they don't know why. It's just as if there's a call inside them, and there is. It's part of you, part of your realness that you are touching when you pursue spirituality. Expanding your consciousness to understand that here inside the physical plane, in that sense, you have many, many parts of you, many pieces of you that make up who you are. You have an inner child, you have an adolescent, you have a you the lesser, which is primarily the you who makes choices out of fear and has a lot to say about death. You have a you the more, which makes choices out of growth and would have an awful lot to say about death if you'd let yourself talk to them. You have a shadow. You have an ego that frequently has gone negative. A martyr, a magician. A lot of different parts that are based in what you call your physical experience. But you also have a higher self that so many of you have touched, have talked to, have had interaction with. And that part of you exists 100% outside of physical reality, and yet you have the ability to communicate with them, to touch them and be touched by them. And that higher self is only one aspect of who you are that stretches outside of the physical. There are many aspects of you that stretch outside of the physical. We would suggest to you there is a lot more of you outside the physical than there is inside. And one of the very reasons that you come here to learn, to grow, to reach, to stretch, to learn about creating reality. And out of learning about creating reality, you're doing it inside a particular set. You planned it. You said, I'm going to go learn about it here where there is time and there is space. And time and space are very valuable because between the thinking of my thoughts, feeling of my feelings, believing of my beliefs, the exercising of my attitudes, my choices, and my decisions, I want time. I want space. Because I'm learning, because I'm growing, because I'm stretching, because I don't know enough yet in that sense, consciously, to be able to generate reality directly, instantaneously. Think about it. Do you trust yourself enough that every single thought you think and every single feeling you feel would be instantaneously translated into a physical expression?
The answer for myself is no, not yet.
You find a lot of people say that, and rightly so. Again, we're not criticizing, it's not diminishment, it's knowing where you are. And that's why you have time and space while you learn to be more real, more clean, more honest, more emotionally honest, more mentally honest, more spiritually honest in that sense with yourself, with what your talents are, with what your strengths are, with what your natural gifts are. You come to learn. But part of that learning, it has an arc of learning. You reach a point, you reach a place where in order to expand that learning, you must expand your consciousness. And you must expand it past what you call limitation, what you call boundaries, what you call your physical plane.
At this moment, with the reference to time and space, I just got a cue that we have about, I think about a minute and a half left.
Oh.
So I'll leave that to you to...
See, we're not good at time and
I
space
know
yet.
that. That's, nor am I. That's why I have a cameraman holding up a card that says 1 minute.
All right. Well, that went quickly, didn't it?
Didn't it, though? I imagine you could talk for a week or two on this subject,
Probably,
at least.
yes. In that case, let us wrap up very quickly with the concept that you need to let yourself expand your ideas of what death is, because it will make such a huge difference in your life, in your willingness to live it, in the freedom that you have in being alive. You cut that freedom off so much when you're afraid of death, when you think it's bad and ugly and dark and all that stuff that you pile up that pushes you away. It robs you of the juice, of the passion, of the wonder that life itself is.
With that, Elanor, and I don't like doing this, cutting you off mid-sentence, but we are running out of time. But the good news is we're doing a second show. I want to thank the audience for their attention today. Once again, the name of this show is Living Wisdom, and I'm Patty Paul, saying goodbye until the next time.